So people who have been told you're about to die can take this mushroom and not be afraid.
Welcome, Andy. So, Andy Schuelein is going to talk about hacking reality, ego death, and the archaic tools of modern-day shaman. Ancient shamans have been practicing ego death all throughout antique. What techniques did they use? What is the ego, and why does it need to die? Is the introduction of his speech.
Yeah.
Andy is from the US. He's as you already just mentioned, he's a big book author, filmmaker, public speaker, and an entrepreneur. And one of his passions is the subject that he is going to be talking about tonight. And I'm actually really, really curious about ego and ego death, so I'm very much looking forward to hearing that. So, Andy, stage is yours.
All right. Do you want me to start over? No, we'll skip the first slide. So if you're going to hack reality, the best way to go about it is to start hacking away at your ego. The tools that I'm going to talk about they're archaic. They've been around for as long as we've been recording history. And I'm only going to scratch the surface of two subjects, shamanism and ego death. So with that, your ego might not be what you think it is. You think of an ego as being maybe somebody who's egotistical, somebody who knows it all, somebody who's always got to be there first. But your ego it's that voice inside your head. It's that voice that's always talking to you. It's what you call me or I. It never shuts up. Even though you try to quiet that voice, it always sneaks up on you, and it's there again. And that chatter in your head becomes who you are. Its role is to try to find a balance. So if I push you, instead of cowering back, you might push back. And that's your ego trying to find balance and equilibrium. So it is that voice, that normal everyday stream of thoughts, but it goes deeper than that because you are aware of those thoughts. And there's an awareness of the awareness. And then we have an awareness of the all. And you could probably take this as far down as you want and just keep repeating. But the sum of all of that is who you are. So not only do these layers of awareness exist, each of these layers of existence, of awareness, seem to sometimes have their own opinion and their own thoughts. And when they all start talking to you, that's when things get a little bit noisy and a little bit frustrating. So what people have tried to do all throughout history is to quiet that noise. Or as you get into your midlife, maybe find a way to kill it and have it be reborn again. So your ego is like a multi-layered conversation that you're always having with yourself. Now, if you're having a conversation with someone else, that person might convince you to do something that you wouldn't normally do. It might change your thoughts on something. And that's called convincing someone of something. When all those thoughts are happening inside your head, we call that a decision. Now, if you're talking to someone who's toxic or unhealthy, they can give you bad ideas. And if your ego is unhealthy, you get unhealthy decisions. And egos can be healthy, they can be productive and good, they can also be broken and unstable. But regardless, you are a manifestation of your ego, whatever it is. So what is ego death? And this is where it gets a little bit controversial, because ego death, I'm not talking about the death of the physical body or any kind of brain damage. I'm talking about killing that voice inside your head and letting it be born again, stronger and better than it was before, and under your control at the same time. So we're going to talk about some archaic and some modern techniques to do this. And in order to discuss this, I have to bring up entheogens. Now, entheogens are sacred plants. They come in all shapes and sizes. Like the Psilocybe similanceata, or liberty cap mushrooms. Now, these are as old as history gets. Mushrooms, herbs like cannabis, synthetics, LSD. There are brews. I can think of ayahuasca, and even some animals like the Bufo alivarius toad. Now, entheogens are substances that induce psychoactive effects used for spiritual, religious, medicinal, and even recreational purposes. But to break the word down, we have en, theo, and gen, to generate God within you. And I'm not going to get religious on you, but to redefine the word God, we'll look at the word psychedelic, because that's another word that kind of replaces entheogens, is a psychedelic. So the word psychedelic comes from the Greek word psyche and delos. So meaning mind manifesting, to manifest your soul. So that's what we're generating, is the God within you, your mind or your soul. And these techniques used to be not taboo. It used to be something that was passed down from grandfather to father to the child. Today, this is something that is kind of awkward to talk about in public. And I'm worried about how it's going to be received here in Helsinki. Because this boundary has been created between being able to peer into the abyss and where we are on our regular, everyday waking consciousness. So today these are illegal and taboo in our society. And that seems to be the whole name of the game, is to create these walls or these boundaries between this realm and any other realm. Society loves it when things are always the same. Culture and society hate change. So we find ourselves in these ruts, these grooves of thought, just expecting something to change. I forget who gave me this analogy, but it's worth mentioning that if you think of your mind as a hill covered in snow, and your skis are your thoughts. After a while, after you keep coming over the same hill over and over again, you wear out these grooves in the snow, and before you know it, you can't come over that hill anymore without slipping into these grooves. And culture and society loves this. And what entheogens do is they freshen the snow. They dissolve your ego. And this means that they dissolve the walls between you and your past, between you and your part of your unconsciousness that you don't want to look at. Terence McKenna once said that they dissolve the boundaries between the church and the state, the poor and the wealthy, the black and the white, the male and the female, the young and the old, the gay and the straight, the foreign and the familiar, even the living and the dead. These entheogens or psychedelics dissolve the walls between you and the world. All of the walls and the boundaries that we've built up to keep ourselves from feeling our true circumstances just get washed away. And this is the most threatening activity that can go on in a society. That's why one of these mushrooms is illegal. Now, the one on the left is poisonous. If you eat that, chances are you're not going to survive the night. And the one on the right is Psilocybe cubensis, also known as magic mushrooms. It's funny how you can possess poisonous mushrooms, but the ones that make you think outside the box are illegal in most parts of the world, even though they're older than most, if not all, of our modern day religions. And I'll talk more about this mushroom in just a minute. Another entheogen is cannabis marijuana. Now this can really deflate your ego, especially if you're an aggressive type of person. Where I'm from, this is being used medicinally in several different states in the United States. However, when I come here and talk to people, I hear a lot of people equating it to heroin, or if not heroin, well, it's just one step on the way to doing some really hard drugs. So the difference between what I'm seeing with entheogens in other parts of the world is that it's growing to be more and more accepted. That mushroom that I mentioned is actually legal in one of the states in the US now. And marijuana can be used to treat a number of diseases, Alzheimer's, Crohn's disease. It's making some remarkable strides in cancer research. It's destroying cancer. And I hope the sound works. If we can meet Jacqueline for just a minute.
I was I'm born with cerebral palsy, which most noticeably manifests itself in a severe stutter.
So that's her life every day, unless she has some cannabis.
After about the third hit is when I began to feel the tension dissipate. It really helps my speech. I feel much calmer, much less rushed, and I feel like I can control the muscles that I couldn't control before I smoked.
So that's just one example, and I could do that all night. But for entheogens in general, to look at them as a party drug is a terrible way that our culture has painted this picture. The uses of these plants are endless. I did want to touch on cannabis one more time to say that when this is consumed by eating it, it can be up to 10 times more potent. So that can be really beneficial on a medical side. But talking about your ego, some people have eaten too much of this and they feel like they're going to die. And as funny as that can be, if you search YouTube, there's some really funny videos of a police officer actually in the US who ate too much cannabis and called the ambulance and said, "I think I'm already dead."
I think I'm having an overdose, and so is my wife.
Overdose of what?
Marijuana. I don't know if it had something in it. Can you please send rescue?
Do you guys have fever or anything?
No, I think we're dying.
Okay, how much did you guys have?
I don't know. We made brownies, and I think we're dead. Time is going by really, 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 really slow.
Well, instead of being charged, Prella. Sorry.
It's kind of funny, but what he thought was happening was that he had died, and that's one thing that happens quite a bit with these psychedelics, is you feel like you're going to die. And if you talk to somebody who's actually had a near-death experience, hit by a train, struck by lightning, something like that, they often will tell you that this was life-changing. And they changed their lives for the better. They often weigh their lives on the moment of my life before this happened and after. It's a sudden realization that life is a gift. And that's where I'm trying to head with discussions of ego death, because getting hit by a bus will squash your ego and injure you at the same time. And what the shamans were doing, we're trying to find a way to rehearse for actual death so that it's not so startling. Now, you might think of this as a bad trip, but it's actually the best thing that could happen for these participants, because the fear of death is the mother of all fears, and if you can conquer the fear of death, you can conquer the fear of anything, because you don't die. Only your ego dies. Just that voice inside your head and this feeling that maybe I've eaten the wrong plant or something like that. Your ego does not want you to take entheogens. Now, psilocybin, this is the mushroom I was showing you earlier, produces substantial and sustained decreases in depression and anxiety in patients with life-threatening cancer. So people who have been told you're about to die can take this mushroom and not be afraid, which is a mouthful to think of something that can happen in a matter of 6 hours to where you no longer fear death. It's being used currently to treat PTSD, childhood trauma. These are things that your ego can break your ego, and this is one way to repair it. Just speaking technically, I need to move along, but Tabernathi iboga or ibogaine is also a psychedelic. It's a root bark that's often grown in Gabon, South Africa. One dose of this, the psychedelic effects can last a week or two, so you'll need to have someone with you if you're ever going to try this. But it can, in one treatment, treat heroin addiction and a lot of other addictions, even methadone, which is, I don't know how bad things are here, but in the U.S., they'll get you off of heroin and put you on methadone, and the next thing you know, you're going to your pharmacist for your fix. I had to throw this mushroom up here because I see it everywhere, and everyone that I talk to here in Finland tells me that you're not even supposed to touch this mushroom because it's so poisonous. If I had more time, I would talk to you for a couple of hours about how this mushroom has been consumed all throughout history for several different reasons, but we'll have to get into that another day. It's this shamanic consciousness that I want to discuss that will break your ego down and allow you to rebuild your ego back the way that you want it to be, as opposed to just being a process of 20, 30, 40, 50 years of your ego just becoming whatever it turns out to be. Now, we are psychedelic creatures, naturally. 4 LSD-like compounds exist in humans. This is from 1978. This is from the Boston Globe. It's an accredited newspaper. There is a psychedelic substance called dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, that occurs naturally in your brain. You can ask me about this later if you need, or write it down now. This is a wonderful book on the subject. There are entheogens, psychedelics, mushrooms, ayahuasca, LSD, and things like that. And then there is DMT. Dimethyltryptamine is the most potent psychedelic substance ever discovered. And it occurs naturally in our brains. And you may have heard of people meditating and trying to invoke the Kundalini energy. I don't get into the meditation part too much, but I know that this will stimulate the pineal gland. And stimulating the pineal gland is the seed of the soul. That is where the dimethyltryptamine is being manufactured, in your brain. And it will crawl up your spine, come over the back of your head, and before you know it, you are having a psychedelic experience. This takes years of practice with meditation. With the shamanic method, it happens rather quickly. And this is where we get the symbolism of the chief with his headdress. The headdress is a symbol of this out-of-body state of mind. And this goes for religion as well. This is another picture that I can't really talk about today. This would take too much time. But the halo is another symbol of that otherworldly dimension that the person is experiencing. Now this comes from the cerebral spinal fluid that your brain is literally bathing in. All of this blue area around the outside of the brain is the cerebral spinal fluid, and that contains dimethyltryptamine. The same thing that the Bufo alivarius toad has in its skin, the same thing that the ayahuasca brews have as their active ingredient, is what your brain is literally floating in. And here's another picture where I've highlighted this ventricular system. This is your third eye system, where your pineal gland is seated right in the center of this. And if we look through history, we see these in Egypt. Now there is a way to achieve this without doing drugs or altering your state of consciousness in a way that you can't immediately undo. This is an isolation chamber or a deprivation tank. I think there's somewhere in Helsinki that you can rent these by the hour, just like a tanning bed. It's filled with water and salt, about a ton of salt. So much salt that you actually float. You don't sink to the bottom. The lid is shut and the lights go out. So you can't hear anything, you can't see, you can't taste, you can't smell, you can't feel. Everything goes away until all you're dealing with is pure, raw consciousness. And of course, we all have that laundry list of things that we go through in our head when the lights go out. But after you let go of letting go, and let go of the feeling of letting go, you have a full-blown psychedelic experience complete with ego loss or ego death. But you have to work your way through the onion of your own thoughts before you can get to it. It's not a brew that you can take and just sit back and let it do the rest. So that's one way of achieving this without the taboo nature of ingesting anything. So I hope I didn't go over this too fast, but that's the end of the talk. And we have about 5 minutes for questions if you want to do that.
Hello, thank you
Yeah.
for the presentation. From somewhere I read that aluminium goes to the pineal gland and is stuck with the chemicals and stuff. It's cleansing it. Do you have some ideas for that?
I've read about certain things that are in the water that might contain aluminum that can calcify your pineal gland. Now, I don't know how much credit I put in that. I've also read some counter theories and talked to that Dr. Rick Strassman, who wrote that book, DMT, the Spirit Molecule. And he doesn't seem to think that there's much to that in either. So fluoride and things like that, I don't pay too much attention to that anymore. I really don't.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
I'm curious to know, what do the healthcare professionals, doctors, think about the use of mushrooms? Or
Well, of course it depends on who you ask.
Yes.
But the ones in the U.S. that I know of are leading the research in this, and they are actually giving their patients, terminal cancer patients, the option to do this in a clinical setting. Which may not be the best setting for something like this, but it's a start, and I think it's a good start. I lost both my parents to cancer, and I wish they had something that gave them the perspective that I've seen, because it really is like an off switch for fears of the unknown. Yeah. But it's becoming more and more accepted. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of research going on as well. Switzerland is actually quite pioneering in that area in Europe, at least. I think.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Just regarding your last comment, Andy. So how can I say? Do you see this as a cure against cancer, or just as a tool to kind of mitigate effects and kind of make the transition to the other life easier?
So, both kind of. I don't want to glorify this too much, but cannabis is now being seen to kill tumors. So, the research isn't solid, and I don't want to say something that isn't true, but there's hope. There's hope. Now, for the acceptance of the fear of death or something like that, yeah, it's a cure. Well, it's lasted 25 years for me, and I don't see it, my opinion, changing. So, yeah.
Andy, what brought you to this topic?
I had out-of-body experience once where I ate way too many mushrooms, and I woke up the next day and I realized that I can't be the first person to have had such a profound experience. So I went looking for it in history and mostly religion, because I grew up really religious.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, did that ever open my eyes. So, yeah, it's just personal experience.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Andy.